Welcome to Dutch the Podcast. I'm Mike right here, and right there is Tom Byfoot, and he's the publisher of Dutch the Magazine, and of course the executive producer of this here show, this fine podcast, Dutch the Podcast. Hi, Tom.
Hey, Mike. How are you doing?
Doing good, thanks. And by the way, thank you to you for subscribing and watching and listening. The show has really taken off, and in fact. Tom, congratulations to you. Just before we started the show today, I pointed out, man, you've become like a real broadcaster here. Well done. Man.
Yeah, that was very nice of you, Mike. And it's really kind that you repeated live on the show so that people know that what I'm doing is, going down well with a real professional like yourself.
Okay. Well, you know what I was going to say? I can show it to some real professionals and get a second opinion. But in my opinion, you are number one. And the show, by the way, doing very well on all the platforms. Every week we have a different guest. Tom makes sure of that. And we cover off on incredible stories with incredible people with a touch point on the Netherlands, whether it's historical or current, which today's guest certainly is current. We tap into the culture. Tom, let's encourage people to reach out and communicate back with us.
That would be great if they did that. Yes, to all our listeners, go to dutchthemedia.com. There you'll find all kinds of information, our blogs, information about our books and magazines, but most importantly, our contact form. And I'd like you to use that contact form if you've got anything you would like to share about the show. Questions, comments, suggestions for topics, suggestions for guests. We're open to receiving it all, and I'd love to read those communications that come through dutchthemedia.com and our contact form there.
We encourage you to do that. And of course, many of the stories that and the people that you meet through the podcast are initially stories that you'll find in the magazine or the books are featured as a publication in the store. Please, we encourage you to go and have a visit. Now, today's guest is such a fun and exciting, I guess, entrepreneurial story, Tom.
Yeah, an entrepreneur, young guy, came to Canada following love, from what I understand, started working here, and he had one passion, and that passion he wanted to, well, I suppose he had two passions if he came here for love, but the other passion was Dutch bicycles. That was something. We all come to Canada as immigrants, and there's always something you miss. You make a positive choice. You come for Canada for a good reason, but you leave something behind. That's inevitable. One thing that this guy, his name is Bas de Beer, left behind was his solid, sturdy, well-maintained, easy to ride, safe Dutch bicycle. So
indeed. What
did he do? He didn't sit around, he didn't mope. I miss my Dutch bicycle. No, what did he do? No. He started a business. Well, so we're going to be talking about Dutch cycling culture. But before we do that, Bas, maybe you can introduce yourself and your business for our listeners so that they know why you have been brought on as the expert on Dutch and cycling and everything to do with that.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Tom, first of all, for having me on the show. I'm super honored to be a part of this. I actually, my story with Canada and bikes and why I started Go Dutch Bikes is I moved to Canada in 2011 to be with my now wife, was my girlfriend at the time, and to build my new life here. And the one thing that I was missing was my Dutch bike. And the only way that I was going to get that Dutch bike was by obviously importing one from Holland. Because unfortunately, I wasn't able to get my hands on one here in Canada. And it seemed like when going to bike shops that most of the bikes that they sell here are oriented towards performance. So performance riders, people that love to ride for speed. And I was kind of looking for that like classic Dutch cruiser that gets me from A to B. More practical.
Biking to go somewhere rather than biking for exercise, right?
That's it. And being in Canada, obviously, I was missing that. And I kind of came up with the idea to import hundreds of them, not just for myself, but for everyone to enjoy.
That's great. And you started doing that. When did you start doing that?
Well, it was great timing. I started doing it right around the pandemic when all the bike shops were basically out of bikes. and I saw a definite need for more bikes to be added to Canada or entered into Canada. And I wanted Dutch bikes, authentic Dutch bikes. So obviously, due to the pandemic, a lot of bike stores were experiencing shortages.
They're closed, right?
And and so that was kind of like a perfect entry point for me to step into the world of bikes. And I'd never been an entrepreneur myself, but I started up with an online bike shop on top of my full-time job.
Okay.
Still running it on top of my full-time job. I work for the Princess Margaret Cancer Foundation as an event operations manager. So I work on all their cycling routes. So it's very cycling related. And on top of that,
and you use it for fundraising then as well.
Yeah. So it's actually one of the top 5 cancer research centers in the world. And it's the Ride to Conquer Cancer that I work for is the largest athletic cycling fundraiser in Canada.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So you were missing your Dutch bike, and we'll get to what is special about Dutch bikes in a minute. And you'd be able to talk to that extensively if you're importing hundreds of them. But let's look at Dutch cycling culture first. Just as a general term out there, how would you describe Dutch cycling culture as compared to that in other countries? And in particular, we're looking at Canada and the US here.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's very interesting to look at that, right? As a kid, I think before I even could walk, I was on a bike. That's not completely true. I was able to walk before I could jump on that bike, but that is kind of how it goes, right? Like you jump on a bike whenever you have the opportunity to get from A to B, but it's not necessarily like the way that I see it is a lot of people in Canada and the US prefer to use their car to get to the grocery stores. And in the Netherlands, it's all about grabbing the bike to get from A to B or to get your groceries or to run your errands.
Well, you talk about being a kid, right? We'd bike to school, obviously, but we'd also bike to the swimming pool. And yeah, it was a means of transportation. Of course, kids being kids, we'd race each other. But in general, it's still, I had a paper route for a long time on the bike, loads of papers in my bags. Yeah. Now, I'm going to mention something else about Dutch biking culture. And you came to Canada after I did, so things may have changed. I don't know. But when I was, and you're a lot younger as well, but when I was in elementary school, in grade 4 or 5, we had a traffic exam. Consisting of a theoretical, a written test, and then actually a road test. You had to bring your bike, they check out your bike, and then you were sent like a real driving test. Now, are they still doing that?
You know, that's funny. I can vaguely remember something like that taking place at my school. That was a long time ago. I have to admit, I don't know if they're still doing it. I'm sure they are. I
was just wondering if you had more recent experience, but I went online and yeah, they are still doing it. And 80% of Dutch schools, elementary schools, actually do a road test still with their kids. Isn't that amazing?
I kind of remember this because I remember the teachers standing on the corners behind a bush to make sure that you stopped at the light and making sure that you're adhering to all the rules and that your bike obviously has all the lights on it that it needs to have on it in order to participate in local traffic.
Now, the funny thing is, yeah, you're right. They checked the rules. You had to stop for the red traffic light and you had to use hand signals when you were turning. Now, as soon as people get onto their bikes in the Netherlands, they may not stick to those rules that strictly, right?
Yeah. I remember as a kid where I got pulled over and I got a ticket for not having a front light on my bike, but I did have a back light on my bike. And I remember how frustrated I was because my light broke like during my ride, right? My dynamo stopped working. I was like, there's no way I could fix this. And maybe that's the reason why I came to Canada. It's a little more loose, the rules.
Maybe so. I read in the paper today that one of the city councillors in Amsterdam wants to implement a maximum speed of 20 kilometers per hour for bicycles. Oh, yeah. Do you think that's going to go anywhere?
So listen, I have to admit, e-bikes like the one behind me, I don't know if you guys can see, they're obviously very immensely popular, and it creates a difference in speed between the regular cyclist and the e-bike cyclist. And I have to admit that I would love to see in Canada some sort of enforcement for people that ride e-bikes. There should be some sort of legislation behind it that supports the e-bike rider if they get into an accident, but also protects us as cyclists from, well, if you look out there, like there's a lot of e-bike cyclists that are just going too fast for their comfort. And I think we have to be aware of it, and we have to, and the rules have to change for that to be accommodated. Insurance has to be in place for e-bikes, I think, and it should be the same in the Netherlands. And I know in the Netherlands they always feel a little bit of a step ahead, but this type of stuff, obviously, bikes have been around forever, so it continues to evolve, and hopefully that will be the same for Canada as well.
Yeah, so I had a question written down about that, and you raised it, so we may as well talk about it now. Is the legal position of the cyclist in the Netherlands different to that in Canada, with on the road in terms of liability and right of way in particular?
Yeah, I think you're more within your right in the Netherlands than you would be here in Canada, and why do I say that? I mean, in Canada, as a cyclist, I feel like you're a little bit more vulnerable as there's not as much cycling infrastructure. So therefore, you do need to be a lot more responsible on the bike. A great example is when I first moved to Canada and I started biking around here, I would have never guessed that I would have to wear my helmet. But I wore a helmet for my own safety, right? And I still do whenever I go on bike rides. Helmet is of absolute importance here in Canada. Versus when I grabbed a bike in Holland, whenever I go back, I would not even consider wearing a helmet. It's because of how safe I feel. So I'd say there's a big difference there for sure.
Well, that's partially, I guess, because in the Netherlands there's this whole bicycle infrastructure, with separate laneways and even separate traffic lights and things like that. And I think drivers are more attuned to bikes.
That's it. That's exactly it. I had to retake my driver's license here, and I remember there was nothing about cyclists there in my driver's license test. And so you have to maybe ask yourself, can you blame the driver for not understanding how they have to act around cyclists? I mean, there's a general understanding, especially from those that actually ride a bike and are in a car. But those that don't ride a bike maybe don't have that understanding, and there's a true gap there that has to be filled in. And I think I don't want to sound too negative, because I think also since when I moved here, there's been great strides made in the cycling culture, the cycling progress, like in terms of bike lane infrastructure being built on those downtown streets, and even making their way up to where my store is, more uptown in mid-Toronto. But I can definitely see improvements being made, and that excites me, right? Amsterdam was never a cycling city until it became one. And,
Yeah,
so
that makes sense. Yeah. Let's move on then a little bit to using bicycles in a practical way, not just for sport. I used to commute by bike in the Netherlands all the time. I loved it. It was a great way to start the morning. The weather couldn't always be perfect, but I cycled through a park and along some lanes, and you get a bit of exercise in. What do you think is a reasonable distance for a bike commute?
I'd say anywhere between 10 to 15 kilometers. I would say is reasonable, and I'm just basing that off of my commute that I have to do to get downtown. And,
tell me about your commute. Just what's it look like? How far is it? What kind of obstacles might you find along the way? Where do you feel more protected?
Yeah, it's interesting. Like my commute is actually doesn't really have bike lanes on it. So I am on the road, and I do occupy the road, and I take the road. What does that mean? I own the road, right? I'm not cycling in the middle of the road, but I am very aware of other cars and other traffic around me, and I want to make sure I'm seen. So how does that look for me is riding down Spadina Road? I'll be the most visible cyclist you'll ever see. I've got lights on my bike. I've got lights on my helmet, and I wear reflective clothing. So people are able to see me.
Just as an aside, do you sell those as well?
Yeah, 100%. I actually have helmets built in blinkers, built in lights. We have lights that you could put on your bikes. So we sell all of that stuff. Like we're all about safety, right? And
So you advise, I could come into your store and say, hey, listen, I live in Etobicoke or I live in Scarborough. I got to commute to downtown. What do you suggest?
100%. Like that's where we kind of consult on what it is that you need. So, for example, if you're commuting every day, I would say a great helmet with lights in it pays for itself. It's your safety that you're talking about, right? So people
Right,
are willing
absolutely, yeah.
to obviously invest. And the nice thing about Go Dutch and the way that I created this company is the way I'm selling you a bike is the same way you'd be sold a bike in Holland. So what does that mean? It comes with a lock to protect your bike. It comes with lights, working lights, so you're able to be seen. And it comes with fenders and chain guards to protect the bike from everyday use. So it really comes with all the essentials that you need. So that's just some sort of standard that I think we should set as a precedent for bikes being sold in general, right? Like here in Canada, it feels like you have to buy every part separately. And I'm really trying to give you the Dutch experience of having a bike and all the essentials there.
Okay. Now, I don't want to be negative, but it can get pretty cold out here. What do you do? Do you use it year round, or do you?
Yeah, year round.
So tell me about it a little bit. We had a big snowstorm a few weeks ago. Lots of snow fell. How did you get around that?
So first of all, when I moved here, I had the same feeling, right? I was like, how do I get around when there's a big snowstorm that has just dumped a couple feet of snow? How do I get around that? First of all, you don't bike the first day after a snowstorm. That's my rule of thumb. If the roads haven't been plowed, don't get on your bike. Maybe just wait until the first plow has come and has plowed the roads, just to make it a little bit more safe for yourself. Outfit your bikes with studded tires really helps. And in terms of what you're wearing, it's obviously perceived as being a cold day. You have to wear multiple layers. And I have to admit that you don't actually really have to wear that many layers. As long as you have a good thermal layer underneath your jacket, you're going to be warming yourself up by riding your bike. It's a lot tougher, especially in snowy conditions. So you're going to be warming up pretty quick. And honestly, you're going to be warm by the time you get to work. That's for sure. But I've never felt like I was ever cold on a bike ride. Just means you got to work a little harder.
Perfect. But now let's flip that, because you've lived here long enough to know it can get pretty hot and humid in summer. Suppose the breeze keeps you cool by cycling, right?
Breeze definitely keeps you cool. I mean, I would ride my bike in shorts in every day in the summer, because that's just the best feeling, right?
Right. Well, I have to admit, when I lived in Holland, I worked in an office, and we're talking quite a while ago. I've been in Canada 25 years almost. I still wore a suit and tie, but I'd still cycle. Wearing my suit and tie to work could get a little warm in summer, but you could take your jacket off and get it on your rack on the back, and that all worked fine.
Well, that's another great thing, right? Like it's these bikes are Dutch bikes in general are outfitted with racks that you can put your stuff into, and what you're now seeing is that a lot of interesting ways to store your stuff. I have a guy selling bikes in my bike store that's actually from Canada. That is a bike bag that turns into a backpack. So it's a pannier that you can clip onto your back rack, but it turns into a backpack. And so there's some really innovative ways to store your stuff and tuck your stuff away on a Dutch bike.
Yeah, and that was thanks for bringing that up, because I was wanting to ask you about that. The Dutch use their bicycles. I've seen people move a house with a bicycle, maybe a cargo bike, but still. Actually, I've done it myself when I was a student. You'd move from one place to another. I didn't have that much stuff. You could put 2 or 3 trips on a bicycle with a good rack on the back. You'd get it moved. But you see kids, pets. What can you not move on a bike?
I mean, it really is true. It's funny. I had a bike that was actually going to New York, because I provide shipping too, And I was like, how do I get it there? I'm like, I was going to grab my bike with the front rack, put the bike on the front rack on the bike. So it's a bike on a bike, and ride it over to the UPS store. And you should have seen the guy's face when I got there. He couldn't believe that I delivered it by bike. But,
Yeah.
Listen, maybe that's not recommended for people to
Yeah,
ride.
just like moving another bike, right? You've done that as well.
We've done that and learn from it.
And maybe there should be a maximum of the number of people you can carry on one bike.
That's for sure. That's where there's cargo bikes that fit perfectly into that. I put my 2 kids in my cargo bike, and I ride them all over Toronto. And it's by far the best and the safest way to transport your kids.
Now, this is probably that's a good point to how Dutch bikes are different. I had one question before we move on to that. In the Netherlands, a lot of people also use bicycles for the last mile, so to speak. So they'd commute by transit, maybe get a train or a bus, and then take the bike for the last few kilometers through town. Is that something that you see happening here as well?
Yeah, I don't see why not. I feel like obviously the infrastructure has to be there. What does that mean? It means that there needs to be bike parking at the train stations that is adequate to hold the number of bikes that are going to be there. I know Amsterdam just put in their new underground bike station, right?
6,000 bikes, I think.
6,000 underground bikes. Which is so neat to see, right? But you do see that the infrastructure is not quite there yet. I mean, they're building towards it. And I would say it's totally possible here, 100%.
Can I bring? I don't know this. Maybe you don't know it either. But if I'd come to Toronto from Oakville, where I live, for our listeners elsewhere, Oakville is a town just outside of Toronto. I'd have to take the train, the GO train, and then I get to Union Station. But Toronto is a huge city. It would be great if I could take my bike from Union Station, because that's where the trouble starts. Getting to Union is not the big deal, but getting from Union elsewhere in town. So can I bring my bike on the GO train? Do you know?
I'm pretty sure that you can do that. It's just certain sections of the train that have a bike logo on it that I think you can put them into. To my knowledge, I once did this ride to Oakville, and then I had to find my way back on a GO train. And I remember there are certain times that you can put them in the train. And I also have had people come to me from Oakville or from elsewhere to buy a bike from me and bring it back on the train. And I do know that they've had success doing it. So I'm sure you have to be in designated sections, and I would advise to maybe get in touch with them just to make sure that there's no exclusions to this. I'm sure rush hour it wouldn't be appreciated to bring a bike on the train. So,
but anyway, yeah. So it's something we'd suggest people look into. Okay, now one of the things, commuting by bike. I've done it many times when I still lived in Holland, wearing a suit and a jacket. Now, I don't want to get my suit pants caught in the bicycle chain because it gets all greasy, pulls the chain off. I'm often in winter, especially, I'll be wearing a slightly longer jacket, coat that could get caught in the spokes. I've got to make sure that I can securely leave my bicycle when I get there. And I'm not out there to exercise, so I don't really want to sweat too much. I just want to have a leisurely, pleasurable ride into commute into work. How do Dutch bikes support that?
Yeah, I'm so glad you asked. Dutch bikes, the way that I see Dutch bikes is an all-inclusive experience. And what does that mean? It means that everything is part of your bike that you're going to need for your ride. There's nothing extra that you may need to buy other than maybe a helmet or a basket to attach to the bike. But if you look at a Dutch bike is really made to last, first of all. So there's steel frames. Many of these frames, they also come in aluminum. But many of these
I remember when I went into a store here, and especially one of those big box stores, when I bought the first bike for the kids here, and I lifted it up and I thought, how can this be? This doesn't feel like a bike.
Yeah, well, and there's a reason for that, right? Because I've got bikes in my store that are from 1920 and 1930 that have been around forever and are still around and are still like upholding their standards of really strong quality frames. And even the aluminum frames that they build, they put a coating on it that actually protects it from the rain, because most Dutch people do leave their bikes outside. And bikes have chain guards. So chain guards is there to prevent your pants from getting caught in the chain, but also from your pants not getting greased up by the chain. So,
Exactly, yeah.
And then a twofold of this or a threefold, is that it also is low maintenance, right? Because now the chain is protected from the elements. It doesn't rust as quick. So the chain guard is definitely a fantastic invention, although there's sometimes a pain to work on in the shop because they get brittle over time. You kind of have to finesse them to make sure that they're not rubbing.
What are they made of that they get brittle?
Some of them are made out of hard plastic. Some of them are made of vinyl. I've seen all types of different chain guards. Some are just metal. And the metal ones are obviously the most low maintenance, but I would say that that's a pretty cool and neat feature of a Dutch bike. And obviously the frame lock, so the lock that is attached to your bike, so you're never going to forget that lock at home. It's I call it in Canada, I call it the 5-minute lock, because how quickly a bike can get stolen here in Toronto. And the lock is actually attached to the back frame of the bike, so it's attached to the bike. And you can lock it up, and while you have your eyes on it, I would say, and use a secondary lock to lock it to the pole. And why is that?
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that, because those frame locks, they're great. They're very easy to use. You've always got your key with you. But someone could still lift up your bike and throw it in the back of a truck, I suppose.
They could. But I am hoping that those frame locks, the more that we have them, the more of a deterrent it will be for thieves to just ride away on your bike, because they're no longer allowed to do that, right? Like, we're no longer able to do that with a frame lock on it. So that's what I hope to see with it, as well as using a secondary lock to it. Now you have 2 locks on the bike. It means a lot for security of your bike, right?
So you're not going to deter someone who's really out to steal bicycles, but you are going to make it much harder for the person who is just tired of walking, thinks, hey, there's an unlocked bike, let me jump on it, right? And, however, it's sad that we have to talk about this, but it's a way of it's part of life, right?
Sure. But my number one tip is for people not wanting to get their bike stolen is put an AirTag somewhere on the bike, hidden. Not in plain sight, and keep an AirTag on your bike, because you can actually keep track of your bike at all times. I've put them on all my bikes. I swear.
Okay, so you have an app or something on your phone that follows them?
Yeah, so it's indeed an app to your phone. If you have an iPhone, then that's great, because they're compatible with iPhone, so you can see where your item is going. So you can also see if it's been tampered with or if it has moved. And you'll be able to track it back to where it is at that current time. So you can get the police involved, and they can help to hopefully track it down with you and retrieve your bike for you.
Okay. So looking at the Dutch bike, we talk about the chain guard, code guard sometimes, the frame lock. Got to have fenders, because otherwise you're going to get really wet if the road's wet. And one very practical thing I was thinking about is the bikes you buy here have different valves on the tires. Do you change the valves? Do you use Canadian tires, or do you use Dutch tires?
So let me solve the myth. This is a funny one, because I actually came to realize that after 1 year of working on Dutch bikes, that you don't actually need an adapter. If you have a pump that has both the Presta and the Schrader side, so a 2-way pump, use the Presta on the French valves that are supplied on the Dutch bikes, and you can pump up your tires, no problem.
Okay, now you're using some jargon that's new to me, but and probably to some of our listeners as well. But you mentioned 2 types of valves.
Yeah, there in like on Canadian bikes, there's 2 types of valves. There's either a Schrader or a Presta valve. A Presta valve you usually see on mountain bikes. And a Schrader valve you usually see on road bikes. Now, what I'm trying to say is that the Dutch valve, or the French valve that we call the Blitz valve, you could actually pump it up with your Canadian pump. So you don't actually have to get an adapter. if you have a bike pump that just has a Schrader head on it, you do have to grab an adapter, and those are like $1 at my store, and I can even include them with the purchase of a bike. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Can you tell me briefly and tell our listeners about cargo bikes? I remember when I was a kid, a lot of store owners, like the baker, would have a cargo bike, and he'd deliver bread throughout the town I lived in to households. And that was my main memory of the cargo bike. But they have evolved over time, and a lot of families use them these days, right?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought it up, because cargo bikes are definitely my passion. And as we call them in Dutch, the bakfiets. I remember my dad bringing the bakfiets out, and we would go for a ride to Koningsdag, or actually back in the days it was Koninginnedag, and we'd have the bakfiets with all our stuff in it, and we put it out in the market and
for our listeners. So Queen's Day, as it used to be King's Day right now, is the Dutch national holiday, comparable to 4th of July in the US or Canada Day here. And part of King's Day celebrations is a free market. Everyone's allowed to set up a stall anywhere in the city and just sell their secondhand stuff that they want to get rid of. And there'll be lots of kids in particular selling stuff. That's what you're talking about, right?
Yeah. Hey, I made a lot of money, Tom, in those days.
You bought your first container of bikes with those?
Cargo bikes have definitely evolved from the heaviness of a cargo bike that was back in the days, the steel frames, to the wooden bins. It's now like you have an aluminum frame, you have an electrical assisted motor in it, you have a fully enclosed rain cover on it. It's a plastic bin on the front, in my case, and these cargo bikes are definitely picking up popularity here in Canada as well. I have to admit, I'm starting to see them more and more. It's something that I introduced to my store this year with a pre-sale of them, and I have to admit, they're a real hit.
I'd like to come see them. Do you? So, what do people typically use them for? I mean, if you're needing to move, a couch or a sofa, would you be able to do that? And would you even, you wouldn't want to buy a cargo bike just because you want to have to move something. What do people typically use them for?
So I'm going to say that people with young families that have kids that just want to be able to go out on a day trip on their bike, but do not want to have the hassle of having a bike carrier on their bike, I would say go with a cargo bike. Yes, it may cost a couple dollars, and they are expensive because they are large bikes and they hold a lot of value. But you can carry your entire family in it, and you can go out for the day and have fun. I don't know if you can necessarily put your sofa in it. I don't know if I would try, because the weight, it's a balancing act at that point. Whereas with kids, they sit in their designated seats and they have their seatbelts on. It's safe. I feel extremely safe riding it around. I actually feel like cars in Canada in general give me more space when I'm riding a cargo bike.
How do Canadians react to cargo bikes? Because I'm sure they're not used to seeing them as much as the Dutch are.
People are very excited to see it, the sights of them, and it reminds them of their trips back to Europe, seeing them in Denmark, in Holland, in countries like that, where they're like obviously used on a daily basis. I want to normalize that more, right? Like I want to be able to normalize Dutch bikes in general, and I want to normalize the use of cargo bikes here. And I'm also thinking that this is an important note that I definitely want to push forward, Tom. And it's kind of like back to when I started Go Dutch. The idea of Go Dutch, of bringing these hundreds of bikes to Canada, was not just to make a good buck, because it takes a lot of work and time to build these up. It's really to enable Canadians to be able to ride a Dutch bike and to have that Dutch feel of riding a bike that is like maintenance free, and that gives you the feeling that you're upright, you're more visible in traffic. It really is an all-inclusive approach to bike buying life, and makes biking in general more accessible to people.
So you're a bit of an evangelist, a Dutch bike evangelist.
Yeah.
The Dutch foreign service, the consulates, in the past, I know, did also promote. They had a program called Go Green, Go Dutch, Go Bike. Are they still doing that?
Not that, but I was in touch with the consulate last year. I actually sold a bike to the wife of the consulate general here in Toronto.
Way to go! Good job.
Yeah, and so that's great, right? Because they know what they're getting. They bought themselves a Gazelle, which is a very reputable, if not the most reputable Dutch bike brand in Dutch bikes, and it was awesome to see their support. I don't think that Go Dutch program is around anymore, but I'm hoping to continue it with my Go Dutch brand.
Yeah, and talk to them, see what they can do. That would be amazing.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've been talking about bikes, particularly Dutch bikes, as a mode of transportation rather than sports. Now, of course, cycling is a very popular sport in the Netherlands as well. I mean, racing, and past weekend even a Dutchman won one of the monuments, one of the major one-day races when Mathieu van der Poel won Milan-San Remo. Do you sell any sports bikes? Are you focused totally on the Dutch commuter bike, so to speak?
I have to admit, Tom, I do focus on the commuting bikes, and why is that? Is because there are already so many stores out there that sell road bikes and hybrid bikes that I just want that store for people to go to for their city bikes. So I'm your absolute one-stop shop for city and cargo bikes. And that's what I want to specialize in. I think that's a little bit more interesting to explore other than the performance bikes. Not that I'm not into performance bikes. I love road bikes. I have a road bike. I have a mountain bike. But
that's what I was going to say. There's more bikes in the Netherlands than there's people, because you want to have a decent bike for your commute and your day-to-day, your shopping. But you may also have a mountain bike to go out, into the woods and the forests. And then you may want to have a racing bike, road bike to exercise on the weekend. So so that's great, and I see how you'd want to focus on that. Now, there have been, and maybe there even are, other Dutch bike shops, and I've stepped into one or two of them, and I've got a family of 6 people, and I've looked at the price tag, and I've said, I would love to outfit the whole family with a Dutch bike, but it's just too expensive because they're not cheap. Now, you have found a way around that.
Yeah, I'm glad you asked, Tom. That's totally true. And that's, once again, one more reason that I started up Go Dutch is that I wasn't able to afford myself a Dutch bike here because they were sold to me at such a high price tag that it was unaffordable. So by buying them used is basically what I'm doing. Is I'm buying them used. I give them a second life. So I fix them up here. They're pre-loved bikes. So some of them may have been pre-owned by somebody else and traded in at the local bike shop. And another one may have been picked up from the streets, not stolen, but seized by the city. And then they go up for auction if they do not get picked up by the rightful owner. So by doing it that way, Tom, I'm able to keep my pricing fairly reasonable. Starting at $399 is kind of how my bikes start up.
Well, that's not bad.
Upwards to like $1,000 for a brand new bike. So
you do also sell new bikes. You do have new bikes. Yeah,
because some people might prefer a brand new bike, knowing its lifespan. So knowing like they that it's brand new, that all the parts are new. But at the same time, like I even try and keep those at an affordable rate, because if you look at new bikes, new Dutch bikes, I'd say they start, like Gazelle ones start around the $2,500 mark. So I'm really trying to beat that and beat my competition out, but also providing Canadians with a chance to purchase a Dutch bike if they normally didn't have a chance to visit or to buy one.
That's amazing, because in the Netherlands, you probably also, if you got the chance, buy a secondhand bike if you didn't have enough money for a brand new one. So you mentioned before, and I think this is important, one, they last very long, and two, they're very low maintenance. So that makes it more, I think you call them pre-loved, right? Pre-loved bikes?
Yeah, pre-loved. And,
yeah, go ahead.
No, Tom, that's important to note because why am I buying used Dutch bikes? Is because they are long lasting and they have great quality life amongst like the years that you're going to be using it. And why are they low maintenance? Is because they use internal gears instead of external gears, like you see in Canada with the derailleur. It just requires more maintenance over time. They have internal brakes. Once again, requires less maintenance, so you can actually adjust your brakes yourself. It's not like you need a lesson to learn how to adjust your brakes. It's just like a little bolt that you have to just turn, a dial button, and you just turn it up, and you're good to go. So,
do you sell? Do your bikes have handbrakes, or those Dutch? I don't know what the term for them is. Terugtrappen.
Yeah,
What's
yeah, that's coaster brakes. I sell both because people have the preference for both. So even if people bought a coaster brake, they could actually add a front brake to it if they wanted to at a later stage.
So a coaster brake, just to be clear, is you're pedaling forward, but then when you want to slow down, you push your feet backwards in the opposite direction, and then the brake engages.
You got it. The more power you put into those pedals, the more braking power you'll be able to transfer.
Okay, that's great. Now, I think we were sort of coming towards the end. I was wondering, do you have any thoughts? You mentioned about you're a bit of a Dutch bicycle evangelist, enthusiast. Do you have any particular plans on how to promote Dutch bikes going forward in the GTA, in the Greater Toronto area?
Yeah, I'm actually even thinking outside of the GTA because I know the GTA, the word has gotten out. I mean, I think this is also great, Tom, to be talking to you here on this podcast to bring the word out. But I think other than that, we're actually looking at perhaps even expanding to Ottawa, maybe even looking at expansion into the US to really make it accessible for everyone. I've received a large interest from people out of the Ottawa region to bring Dutch bikes there, and people have even traveled from Ottawa to my store to pick up their bike. So that shows like there's interest. There's definitely a lot of interest for my bikes there, which is interesting to see. And obviously in GTA, I always have a presence because I live here, and this is my home now. And I'm hoping that it is going to expand in its operations. Hopefully, even in the near future, Tom, we might be able to see Go Dutch start his own bike factory here. Who knows?
Wow!
Where you maybe upcycle
big plans.
And so these are plans that we're thinking about in the future of Go Dutch that are very exciting that we want to focus on.
So clearly you're here to stay from what I hear.
You got it.
Okay. Hey, so anything you feel I've missed in the podcast, anything you'd like to share, and then if you could briefly just tell us where to find you, how to get in touch with you, how to order a bike, even if you don't live close enough by to pay a personal visit. Can I buy a bike and have it shipped? And how, what markets do you cover? How far do you go with that?
Yeah. I'm glad you asked, Tom. I think you pretty much covered everything that we wanted to talk about. I'm sure there's always more. But the most important thing is that my store, the way it operates, is actually an online store. We also have a retail store right here in Eglinton in Midtown, so kind of Forest Hill area. But the beauty about like the online store concept is that you can view all of my inventory online. So you don't necessarily even have to travel down to my store.
So I'm not looking at a model. I'm looking at the actual bike, the physical bike that I'll be purchasing.
Yeah, exactly. Physical bike as well as the specifications for that bike. So any remarks on gears or any special features that it has on it. And the nice thing about that is that you can actually shop from the comfort of your home if you don't live in Toronto. So if you are outside of Toronto, I can always provide shipping quotes and ship the bike to you.
Now, is it very expensive to ship a bike?
To be honest, shipping has gotten more expensive over COVID, but we always try and get some price comparisons to get you the best rate possible.
Yeah.
And but we do have to pack up the bike, so that does add $75 to every bike that is sold to somebody outside of Toronto. and we pack it up for you in a box and then ship it out.
And does it come in one piece, or do you have to reassemble it?
It depends. Smaller bikes may not have the need to be reassembled, but bigger bikes, like medium to large bikes, will always need to be reassembled. But all it is the front wheel gets popped back in, the pedals go back on, the handlebars have to be turned, and you're ready to ride.
Okay, so pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, yeah, and then you said you're predominantly online for now, at least. Do people? They can come to the store though. Do they make an appointment, or how does that work?
No, so we're actually open every Wednesday evening and Thursday evening between 7:30 and 9:30 p.m. And on Saturday mornings, we're there between 10 a.m. till 1 p.m. And if you wanted to shop online, you just go to godutch.ca and you'll be able to see my entire inventory.
Perfect. And how far away have you sent them?
Okay, so the last one went to New York.
You ship into the U.S. as well. That's good to know. That's great.
Yeah.
Okay,
that's the first
we've got lots of American listeners, so that's cool.
That's amazing. Yeah. We only just recently started shipping to the U.S. as of 2 weeks ago. So this is a new thing that we're now offering. We want to obviously make it accessible for everyone. COVID made that harder because the shipping rates were just through the roof. It didn't justify the rates of the shipping. But right now they've simmered down to a point where we can manage it okay. And we've also shipped the bike to Alberta a couple weeks ago. So just exciting stuff. So you are seeing the uptake. And we're shipping actually another one to BC this week. So
that's amazing. Wow. Yeah. Wow. Absolutely. It was great talking to you, Bas. So godutch.com or CA?
CA, yeah.
Sorry, I don't want to confuse people there. Nope. Maybe it's best if you just say it.
Yes. Well, I want to say if you are looking for that to experience that Dutch feel, come and visit us either in the store, in person before we sell out. We do have a small batch that we bring in every year. You can also shop online at www.godutch.ca.
Okay, that is wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Bas, for coming on the show. You talk about the Netherlands. You don't always only talk about tulips and windmills. No, we try not to talk about tulips and windmills, but we have to talk about bikes because that's so inherent and embedded in the culture. So it's great to know that there's a Dutch pre-loved bike shop right here in Toronto. Thanks again, Bas.
Thank you, Tom. Really appreciate it.
Okay, so here's what I took from that interview, Tom. Dutch bikes are advanced in almost every way over what we buy in North America. It almost makes me feel like the bike that I own is cheap.
It probably is.
It is, yeah. It was indeed. But certainly talking about the craftsmanship of these bikes, how they're built to be part of the commute, and just how the Dutch lifestyle has incorporated cycling. You put it into perspective. You have a bike for your last mile. You take the train, the first 13 miles, the last mile to work. You pick up your bike at the train station and you make your way to work in your suit.
Absolutely. Done that before many times, yeah.
A very different perspective. And, of course, a very different kind of bike required for that. I'm excited to go and have a look at the store.
Yeah, and so at Dutch the Magazine, we have covered this in quite a few ways. Well, one of the things we did when we first launched the magazine, a long time ago, we had a raffle. We had a real Dutch bike, and new subscribers would be entered into a draw. And a lady in New England won the bike, and she sent us a photograph. It was really cool. She was so happy with it. We haven't done one yet, but you never know. We may go there again. But what we have done, and even in the most recent issue of Dutch the Magazine, I'm looking at it right now, we have an article. We have one of our correspondents, one of our authors, Eric Bryan, likes to write about Dutch companies. He's covered the Gazelle company that Bas mentioned in the interview, but the most recent issue we have Sparta, A Century of Bicycles, an article about another one of those classic Dutch bike brands called Sparta. So we look at bicycles in general lots of times in the magazine.
I don't know how you couldn't. It is such an integral part of Dutch life.
You went to Amsterdam, right?
I've been through much of the Netherlands, and everywhere you go, cycling is the norm. Cars and trucks are in the way.
Did you rent a bike? Did you cycle yourself?
Absolutely. And in fact, it was one of the greatest countryside bicycle rides I've ever had in my life. And boy, you should take a few minutes and learn the rules of cycling if you're going to be in the city.
Sure. Absolutely. So I thought when I mentioned about the speed limit that they're talking about in Amsterdam, you'd probably be able to relate to that as a tourist in Amsterdam.
You have to be careful as you step out of a shop or out of your hotel that you don't get mowed down. Just be aware. Cyclists are very good, but they're also very comfortable on their bikes.
Absolutely. Well, just a quick mention then. I mentioned the magazine, DutchTheMedia.com. We mentioned Dutch the Magazine is comes out every 2 months. For anyone listening to the podcast who does not yet subscribe, we'd love you to subscribe to the magazine. Go online at DutchTheMedia.com. Or give us a call. You can find our contact information on our website. And having said that, subscribe to the magazine. But even better, you can subscribe to the podcast for free. So if you hadn't done that yet, maybe just do it now.
Go right ahead and do that. Don't forget to visit our friend Bas at godutch.ca and check out a new Dutch bike for you or maybe your whole family. And we will catch you next time with another great guest right here on Dutch the Podcast. Thanks, Tom. We'll catch you next time.
Thanks, Mike. See you later.